Did Hitler know about the Holocaust? Imagine this. 6 million Jewish people were murdered, but there's no smoking gun document signed by Hitler saying, "Do it." That sounds unbelievable, right? This has puzzled historians for decades. Some people ask, if Hitler was truly the mastermind of World War II's darkest crime, why can't we find a written order from him? In this video, we're diving deep into Nazi history and the evidence to solve one of history's most chilling questions. Did Hitler know about the Holocaust? We'll piece together clues from speeches, secret meetings, diaries, and war crimes trials to unlock the truth. From the outside, it might seem like Hitler was hands-off. Some documentaries even say he kept the blinds drawn when trains carrying Jews rolled past. But Hitler had spent years promising a Jew-free Europe. Decades earlier, as a young politician, he told a journalist that if he ever got power, his first task was the annihilation of the Jews. In the 1930s and 40s, Hitler's public speeches and propaganda were full of murderous threats. He prophesied that another world war would mean the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe. These weren't just wild threats in the air. They set the stage. But a threat is one thing. Actual knowledge of the killing process is another. So here's the catch. Hitler never left a signed order for the Holocaust. In a way, that's a problem, because governments usually work on paperwork. But the Nazis were different. Hitler ran a dictatorship, where word of mouth could be as powerful as a written law. The Nazi machine was filled with top generals and bureaucrats, Himmler, Heydrich, Eichmann, Goebbels, and more, all fanatically following Hitler's violent ideology. They didn't always wait for his signature. They took his verbal hints and did the dirty work. The big question is, when all this violence was happening from 1941 onward, was Hitler in the loop? Did his private orders set the genocide in motion? Or did he really try to stay above it by never officially writing anything down? Let's follow the breadcrumbs. Hitler's anti-Jewish vision. To understand the puzzle, start with Hitler's own thinking. From long before World War II, Hitler made it very clear he hated Jews. In his book Mein Kampf and in rallies, he demanded Germany be purged of Jews. He repeatedly warned that if a new war started because of Jews, they would face annihilation. And this wasn't some empty bluster. Hitler spoke often of a Jew-free Europe. For example, in a secret 1941 meeting, he told his generals that since Germany had already sacrificed so many soldiers, those responsible for this war will have to pay with their lives. He wasn't vague about who he meant. He said he intended to make a clean sweep of the Jewish question. On one hand, this shows Hitler's intentions were genocidal. On the other hand, it doesn't tell us if he knew the gory details of how it was done. It does prove he wanted Jews gone, with no squeamish sentimentalism. But some people have pointed out that Hitler didn't like paperwork. In fact, historians note, the Nazi state was famously messy. Overlapping offices, duplicate agencies, lots of secrecy. Hitler ruled more by voice command than memo. After a scandal earlier in the 1930s, where public outrage over killing handicapped people, the T4 program, forced him to cancel that written order, he learned to keep genocide orders off the books. This has led to the myth that Hitler might have been some innocent bystander who didn't know what his men were up to. Hunting the clues. But let's break down the clues that answer the question. It's like detective work. There's no smoking gun letter signed by Hitler, but there are plenty of other pieces of evidence. A good way to see them is in bullet points. Hitler's public rhetoric. Even without papers, Hitler shouted he wanted Jews gone. In speeches and writings, he predicted the Jews would be annihilated if war resumed. Those threats were never just words. They were promises of his policy. They set an open target on Jewish communities and gave a green light to violence. Secret meeting orders. On December 12, 1941, Hitler held a highly secret meeting at the Wolf's Lair headquarters. According to Joseph Goebbels' diary, after this meeting, Hitler told his aides that it was time for a clean sweep of the Jewish question, and that those responsible for the war, that is, the Jews in his view, would see their annihilation. This is essentially Hitler deciding, from now on, kill every Jew. No written contract, but a clear oral decision among his generals. Goebbels' diary. Hitler's own propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, kept detailed diaries. After meetings, Goebbels recorded Hitler's exact words. He wrote that Hitler was utterly pitiless toward the Jews and called himself the unswerving champion and spokesman of a radical solution. In one diary entry, Hitler is quoted demanding that the Jews in Europe be dealt with brutally and without mercy. Those aren't interpretations by historians. They're Hitler's own words, captured in private diary form. SS testimonies. After the war, Nazis on trial spilled secrets. One key figure was Adolf Eichmann, an SS officer who organized the deportations. Under oath, he was asked if Hitler had ordered the extermination. Eichmann replied, "All I know is that Heydrich, the chief of the Gestapo, said to me, 'The Führer has ordered the physical extermination of the Jews.'" That's Eichmann recalling Heydrich saying Hitler said it. Eichmann even had a radio interview tape where he repeated, "The Führer has given the order for the physical destruction of the Jews." Holocaust deniers tried to wriggle out by nitpicking words, but the records show Eichmann clearly understood Hitler meant killing Jews physically. Official reports. The Nazis were actually very organized about killing. They kept counts and reports. One chilling piece of evidence is a report titled, "Report to the Führer on Combating Partisans," which tallied that 363,211 Jews had been murdered by late 1942. This report was specially printed in large font, so Hitler could read it without glasses, and marked with a big stamp saying, "Shown to the Führer." In other words, Hitler saw the numbers of Jews killed on his orders in Eastern Europe. He got the updates. Historians' view. Modern historians have studied all this and agree Hitler was at the center. Scholars like Ian Kershaw and Raul Hilberg point out that while no paper order from Hitler has been found, all evidence indicates, to sum up these clues, even without a signature, Hitler's intentions and knowledge leak through in many ways. His speeches and the private diaries of his closest allies show he fully expected a genocide. Nazi records prove he was briefed on every step of the killing process. And after the war, Nazi officials themselves testified again and again that Hitler personally ordered the final solution. The witnesses speak. Let's take a closer look at some of those first-hand accounts. It's one thing for historians to piece together scraps. It's another when Nazi insiders speak in their own voices. Remember, at Nuremberg and other trials, men like Heinrich Himmler and Adolf Eichmann gave statements. Himmler gave a secret speech in 1943, the Posen speech, where he flat out said they were talking about the extermination of the Jewish people. He remarked that every good Nazi understood what evacuation of Jews really meant, and Himmler publicly noted they'd never spoken about it openly, meaning the killings were intentional but hidden. When Eichmann was interrogated by Allied officers, he insisted he never saw Hitler's signature on any order, but he had no doubt Hitler approved it. Eichmann recounted Heydrich's words that the Führer has ordered the physical extermination of the Jews. Criminal Chief Paul Blobel, who handled the later burning of corpses, said Hitler's orders came through Himmler and Heydrich. Rudolf Höss, the Auschwitz camp commander, wrote in his memoirs that Himmler told him Hitler himself had ordered the final solution. Even outside the SS, the man Hitler most trusted for propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, made it clear in his diaries. The Führer was merciless. On February 14, 1942, Goebbels wrote that Hitler's plan was pitiless. There must be no sentimentalism because the Jews deserved the catastrophe they were getting. He literally called Hitler the unswerving champion of radical extermination. No one accused Goebbels of lying. These diaries were taken as genuine evidence. It's like putting together a puzzle. Hitler's men are pieces of glass from his persona, his closest associates and subordinates who watched him dictate policies. They all tell the same story. Hitler wanted and ordered extermination. The evidence stack up. To keep things clear, let's bullet point the biggest clues that tie Hitler to the Holocaust. Hitler's prophecies. Long before the camps, Hitler publicly threatened the annihilation of Jews if war continued. His speeches made his intent clear. Secret directives. In private meetings, like December 12, 1941, Hitler told his generals to make a clean sweep of the Jewish question. This signaled a shift to total genocide. Goebbels' notes. Hitler's own propaganda minister recorded Hitler's fierce demands to destroy Jews by the most brutal means. These diaries show Hitler's attitude was deadly serious. Nazi testimony. Eichmann and others said Hitler verbally ordered the killings. Eichmann testified, "Heydrich said to me, the Führer has ordered the physical extermination of the Jews." Himmler's statements and those of other SS officers confirm Hitler's role. Official kill reports. The Nazis documented every stage of the Holocaust. Hitler received detailed reports of the body counts. For instance, a report to Hitler lists 363,211 Jewish victims, with a stamp shown to the Führer. He saw the numbers grow. Scholarly agreement. Historians like Ian Kershaw emphasize Hitler's leadership style. He often spoke vaguely, but his subordinates acted on those words. Kershaw and others conclude Hitler must have known and approved the final solution. One historian even points out that those who say Hitler didn't know tend to be apologists or deniers. Each of these clues alone might not be a smoking gun, but together they paint a picture. Hitler was the mastermind. He shaped the Nazi agenda, and his will was executed even without a formal paper trail. Historians put the pieces together. By now, a pattern emerges. Hitler's fingerprints are all over the Holocaust, even if he left no signature. In fact, leading Holocaust experts argue it's impossible that Hitler was unaware. As Sir Richard Evans, who once testified at the David Irving trial, noted, there are many documents attesting to Hitler's knowledge of the extermination of the Jews, including the diaries of Joseph Goebbels. The diaries clearly show what Hitler planned and praised. Evans said, "We have to trust these records over conspiracies." Other historians agree. Peter Longerich points out that Hitler avoided written orders to keep the Holocaust secret, but his complicity is evident. Martin Brosat and Raul Hilberg, top scholars, conclude Hitler gave general orders that killed millions. Even Hitler's close friend and valet, Heinz Linger, insisted after the war that Hitler could not have been ignorant of what was done in his name. It was literally his final solution, the term the Nazis themselves used for their plan. What about that idea that Hitler was hands-off and let others run the show, only telling them to do it? Well, think about how Hitler ran Germany. He was a dictator, a very dangerous dictator. His speeches and ideology set the direction. Anyone who failed to figure out how to do it would be executed, as happened on Hitler's orders in 1934 during the Night of the Long Knives. So would the killers in World War II have dared to start murdering by the millions without Hitler's blessing? Definitely not. We should also remember, Germany after World War I was obsessed with Jews as scapegoats. Hitler's whole rise exploited anti-Semitism. It's unlikely his closest circle would invent a plan Hitler didn't want. The order of things in Nazi Germany, Hitler made the big pronouncements, and then subordinates carried them out. He may not have shouted, "Go kill them now," on camera, but his meaning was clear. The evidence is like a chain of testimony leading right to him. The final revelation. So, after all this detective work, what's the verdict? Did Hitler know about the Holocaust? Yes, absolutely. Every credible source says he did. Hitler's known goal was a Europe without Jews, and once World War II began, he set the path to get there. He gave the green light in word and spirit, even if he didn't scrawl it on a document. Nazi killers, from the Einsatzgruppen to the death camp guards, always behaved as though Hitler demanded the work. If you zoom out, the clear truth is, Hitler was fully aware and responsible for the Holocaust. He may have kept it secret from the German public, ordering no public discussion of the killings, and shied away from seeing it himself, but in his heart and mind, he approved every atrocity. Every historian worth reading, from Ian Kershaw to Deborah Lipstadt, agrees on this point. One author put it simply, Hitler knew and he wanted it. Those who claim otherwise are in denial of the overwhelming evidence. The haunting answer to our original question is, yes, Hitler knew about the Holocaust, and it was part of his grand plan. Understanding this doesn't make the story any less horrifying. If anything, it shows how methodical and evil the Nazi regime was. If you found this deep dive surprising, make sure to hit subscribe and keep watching. Next up, we'll take on another historical mystery, so stay tuned.